Welcome back, everybody, to another mock draft episode. Appreciate everybody who's been showing love to the other mock drafts and YouTube shorts as well. We are officially at 200 YouTube subscribers, so appreciate everybody who's clicked that subscribe button. If you guys are new to the channel on this episode, make sure you guys smash that subscribe button for me. We are now on the road to 300 subscribers. Appreciate everybody who's been showing love. Make sure you guys smash that like button and be sure to leave a couple comments as well, as it does help me boost the algorithm on YouTube. With that being said, we're going to jump on into this mock draft here. No trades as per usual, and the same usual suspect at number 1. We have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm going to stay on par with this. I still think Travis Hunter is going to be the number 1 draft pick taken out of this year's draft class, simply because of the talent level that he has. I know wide receiver might not be a need right now for the Jaguars, but let's take a look. Outside of Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk both dealing with injuries this season, so it's not already going off pretty well. Outside of that, you got Parker Washington and Devin Duvernay, who in their own right, they made it to the league. They're doing pretty well, but they're not wide receivers that are going to take you over the top like Travis Hunter can. Now, is he going to play wide receiver? Is he going to play cornerback? That's pretty much the big question right now. I still think he can have that 70-30 split, especially on a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, where even if Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk come back and they are the wide receiver 2 and 3, you still have Travis in there that's able to be interchangeable, and then you can put him on defense for 70% of the snaps. Again, I still don't know how he can do that 70-30, but I do think that it's possible. I've been watching the recovery that he puts into his body, and it is LeBron James-esque, the way he makes sure that his body is game time ready. I do think that he is going to be the number 1 draft pick in this draft class, and I'm not going to change that again. I still think Trav's well worth that number 1 pick. And we get on into the New York Giants, and I'm going to be honest, I have been flirting with the idea of Shedeur Sanders throwing passes to Malik Nabers, and it just sounds so good in my head that I think the Giants have to make it happen. Do I think Shedeur Sanders is the QB1 right now? I'm going to be honest, it's a seesaw battle between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Week in and week out, I feel like I'm just flipping between Cam Ward as QB1, Shedeur Sanders as QB1. It's really a pick your poison with those two. I do think that they both are talented in their own right, but again, there's no clear X factor with them. Like watching both of them on film, I think they do the exact same thing on quarterback. I think Cam Ward's arm might just be a little bit more liver than Shedeur's, but Shedeur has a lot of charisma in his game, and sometimes that's what you need on an offense. You need a guy that can get your offense flowing and get that spark going. Cam Ward is a tremendous leader, but Shedeur commands his team with an iron fist, it almost seems like, and that's pretty much what the Giants need. And again, seeing him throw passes to Malik Nabers could be a recipe for success. So that leads us into the Raiders, who are going to be needing a quarterback, and Cam Ward is going to fall into their lap. Cam Ward's a lot of guys quarterback ones, and I understand why. Again, it's just a seesaw battle with me. And I think it was a mock draft last week on CBS where they said the Raiders are going to have to trade up to get Cam Ward. I don't think that is the case. I think the Giants could potentially fall in love with a prospect like Shedeur Sanders. Is it going to be a little bit questionable because of the media in New York? Yes, but Shedeur Sanders is going to be all right. Like, we're worried about what's going on in the field right now. We're not worried about what's going on outside of the field. That's, dealing with your PR and stuff like that. You get a PR manager for all that good stuff. But Cam Ward going to the Raiders just seems like an excellent pick there. They have weapons there. A running back could also be in play, but is there a running back you're going to take in the top 5? No. Running back you could take in the top 10? Yes. But when you're in the top 5 right now, you kind of want to make sure that you can grab a quarterback for the foreseeable future, especially with the janky quarterback play that they've just had in recent years. But getting into my New England Patriots, I feel like this is another no-brainer. Let's get a big weapon for Drake May to use. Tetairoa McMillan is a prototypical X-receiver in the NFL. And, I mean, outside of Pop Douglas, I'm not seeing a whole lot of upside from our receivers. Keyshawn Boot is pretty talented. He's another one of those LSU guys. Jalen Polk, even in college, he didn't really pop off the screen. Yes, he's an excellent outside guy, probably a top wide receiver 3 in the league, or I should say potentially to be a top wide receiver 3 in the league, but outside of that, I don't see him as a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 1, at least on this team. So I still think we could be in the running for a big weapon like Tetairoa McMillan. And getting into the Panthers, I'm going to be honest, I don't think quarterback is going to be a need there. I do think Bryce Young is getting extremely comfortable, and that can boast really well for the Panthers. I do think that right now they need to be looking probably at an edge rusher, and it's more than likely going to be Abdul Carter. A lot of people had Nick Scourton there. Mykel Williams gives you a lot of versatility across the defensive line. But if you're just looking for a pure edge rusher, it's more than likely going to be Abdul Carter. Nick Scourton, he's played really well, but there's a little bit some questions going on with if he's going to have that bend that NFL scouts are going to like. Abdul Carter hasn't raised any of those question marks, so you kind of got to take him as your edge one in this year's draft. And we get into the Tennessee Titans, and I don't think quarterback's in the running either. I think Will Levis is going to get another year to prove himself. And outside of Calvin Ridley this season, there's no weapons. Like, they have a lot of guys there, but it's just like, again, wide receiver 3 type players trying to play wide receiver 2 and the occasional wide receiver 1 when Ridley's out. So I do think that they can get a guy that can play outside and slot. Emeka Egbuka could be a guy. Kyren Lacy also, I think, is going to rise up draft boards. He's just another one of those LSU prospects, and we've seen year in and year out LSU have those talented prospects. But I think comfortably right now, Emeka Egbuka would be a top 10 pick. Definitely probably top 3 wide receiver in this year's draft class with the way Luther Burden's fallen. But even then, Emeka Egbuka has proven to us, his sophomore year when he was in a loaded wide receiver room, that he can be the guy and be a one. So Emeka Egbuka going to the Titans just makes a lot of sense. We get into the Jets, and I flirted with the idea of a quarterback. I still think quarterback could be in play here. I just don't think Aaron Rodgers wants to be there anymore. I've seen a couple of quotes. I don't know how reputable they are. If Aaron Rodgers really does want out. So I think quarterback obviously could be in play here. But again, you do want to look at some of these other positions that are a little bit more safety net like. And I think one of those being Will Johnson at corner to the Jets. I only say that because Reed is more than likely going to test free agency this season. And a cornerback like Will Johnson lined up with Sauce Gardner, that could be a recipe for success, at least in the secondary. You are pretty much, aligning yourself to leave essentially 2 islands out there. I know Sauce is having a subpar year this season. I've actually been telling my friends that we're calling him a mod right now because of the season that he's having. But I still think he's going to have a good turnaround next season. He'll bounce back. And pairing him up with a guy like Will Johnson could definitely help his game out for sure. So that gets us into the Cleveland Browns, who are more than likely going to be in the running for a quarterback. Like, it's a no-brainer with these guys. That quarterback room is atrocious. I don't think Winston is there for the future. Obviously, Watson going down with the injury sucks, but DTR is not going to be a quarterback one for you guys. So Jalen Milroe could see himself on the Cleveland Browns. More than likely, they will be in the running for a quarterback. If not, I could see them in the running for a running back like Ashton Jeanty. Again, I would take Ashton Jeanty in the top 10. Top 5, no, but top 10, yes. So that could be, an option as well. Nick Chubb doesn't seem to be bouncing back as they hoped coming back from that injury. I mean, obviously, it was a pretty gnarly injury. But with that being said, I still think quarterback's going to be in play for them. And I know that's been pretty much a revolving door for the past decade, 2 decades now for the Browns. But Jalen Milroe going to have to be a guy that they lean on for the foreseeable future if they're looking for a quarterback in the first round, which takes us to the Saints. And I do believe they're going to have to go defensive line or edge here. And I don't think interior offensive line is really a need, especially with Ramczyk out right now with injury. I do think that him coming back next season is going to help. Penning is obviously coming into his own, still very young. I do think edge is probably going to where you want to look, or defensive line, just because Cam Jordan's not getting any younger. Brees is showing you a lot of upside at defensive tackle, but you still want to get him a running mate. I feel like Mason Graham is a big fit here. Mykel Williams, again, though, he just gives you a lot of versatility, not only at edge, but at defensive line. I mean, if you just see where he's lined up on snap, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But Mason Graham has proven himself to be the draft class's top defensive lineman. And we're just going to go ahead and go with Mason Graham as the safety net pick there. It just seems to make the most sense. Getting us into the Bengals. And again, Defensive line and edge is going to be a big need here just because there's not a lot of youth on their defensive line. Most of their guys are about age 30 minimum. It's not a bad thing in the league, but I'm just saying you definitely need a little bit of youth in that room. I still think there's wide receivers that are just waiting for some opportunities. Jamar Chase, more than likely going to get paid. T. Higgins could be on the way out, but I think you give a guy like Burton or Iovis a little bit more looks, you can definitely find yourself a solid wide receiver too there. I don't think wide receiver is going to be a need for the Bengals just yet. With that being said, that takes us into the edge rushers, which gets Trey Hendrickson a running mate, or it gets us into the defensive linemen, which again, age 30 for most of I think the youngest one is 29, with a lot of them being already 30. Get yourself some youth. Kenneth Grant could be a guy that you're looking at. But again, Mykel Williams just gives you a lot of versatility. And I like the versatility that Mykel gives you, which makes him a top edge rusher for me in this draft class. And this is the no-brainer for me. You guys have seen pretty much mock draft in and mock draft out Ashton Jeanty going to the Dallas Cowboys. I still think Ashton Jeanty is well worth a top 10 pick. Just unfortunately could not find a good fit there outside of the Browns. But Browns do need a quarterback. Jeanty going to the Cowboys just makes a lot of sense to me. Again, just like this pick, Will Campbell going to the Bears. Bears need a lot of help on that offensive line because outside of that, Caleb's showing you the flashes that he can get the ball to his receivers, but he needs a little bit more time in that pocket. He's scrambling a lot during the games, and just getting him somebody like Will Campbell, an absolute unit who can be that protector on his offensive line, can definitely help reassure him going into the future. Which takes us to the Indianapolis Colts, and the secondary needs a lot of help outside of not just the safety. Benjamin Morrison could be a guy that they look at here. Shavon Revel could be a guy they look at here. And I'm liking Darien Porter as well coming out of Iowa State. Been watching a lot of Iowa State film because I was watching Jaden Higgins. But not just that, linebacker could also be in play here. I like Jalon Walker. I like Jihaad Campbell. My guy, Harold Perkins, probably the most versatile linebacker in this year's draft class. Been falling down draft boards just because of the injury, but I do think he comes and bounces back very well. Jalon Walker lined up a lot on the defensive line and in the box. Jihaad Campbell does give you just a little bit more versatility than Jalon Walker will with a couple snaps in slot. But again, if you're looking for that versatile linebacker, it's going to be Harold Perkins, who's lined up a lot in the slot. And he gives you a lot of good upside in passing coverages. Taking us over to the secondary, though, with Benjamin Morrison and Shavon Revel still on the board, this is essentially who I would want the Colts to look at. Safety could be in play here, but I just think you need to get yourselves a CB1, and Benjamin Morrison is what they look like when it comes to CB1s. He was the heart and soul of the Notre Dame defense, it felt like, up until his injury. And if that hip injury didn't happen, I do think he was on his way to a tremendous season. Still well worth a first-round pick. Could have found himself in the top 10 had he not got injured this season. But still, I think Benjamin Morrison is the second best pure corner in this year's draft class, which takes us over to the Finns. And again, another no-brainer pick, getting Tua some protection because it seems like coming back from that injury, Tua's come back a lot better. It kind of I seen somebody tweet out it knocked him back into the Tuscaloosa Tua. And it seems evident that it really did. He's having a tremendous season since coming back from that injury. And I know all of his weapons have been loving, his workload since coming back. So then we get into the Bucks, and I really do think edge is probably going to be the move here. Go ahead and get yourself some help on that defensive line. This is probably where we see Nick Scourton go. He does need a little bit more of development, getting that NFL bend, but nonetheless, he is an explosive player, immediate impact guy, and he has a lot of versatility in certain coverages. So Nick Scourton's still going to find himself as a first-round target for sure. And getting into the LA Rams, I do think this is where we see another cornerback come off the board. Shavon Revel, a guy who I've raved about all draft season. He is one of those lengthy, prototypical cornerbacks. 6'3", has a lot of length in his game. We will have to see how he bounces back from his injury, but I think he's going to come back really well. He's a guy that's shown a lot of good technique on tape. And again, playing at Eastern Carolina is not a knock. Again, cornerback's one of those positions where if you can show that you have that teach tape, they're going to go ahead and find you. With that being said, we get into the Niners, and I think this is where we see our first safety taken off the board. Hufanga I don't think is the foreseeable future. You paid your cornerbacks, though. Diamadou Lenoir's paid. Ward's paid. I do think getting a safety like Malachi Starks, which can evidently help the third level of your secondary, is what the Niners need. And I do think guard and tackle could be a potential find, but the guard class is really subpar. Tackles you can kind of find a little bit later in the second rounds. So I do think safety is kind of what you want to take care of if you're the Niners in the first round. But for the Cardinals, on the other hand, tackle's pretty much where you want to go right here, especially with a guy like Josh Simmons, has played snaps on both the left and right side of the line. So definitely a guy that you want to look at in the first round. Aireontae Ersery has been one of my guys in these past couple mock drafts. Kyren Williams is falling down board. Somebody actually said that he's not going to go in this year's draft class, so there's a chance that happens. I'll have to look into that, though, a little bit more for sure. Going to the Falcons, though, Jalon Walker seems like a no-brainer pick. But again, I do think right now Jihaad Campbell is my linebacker one. And I say that because he offers a lot of versatility, and he is a full-fledged captain. He's been a captain since he was an underclassman at Bama, and I just think he just makes the most sense. I felt like the Falcons could have taken care of this need last draft when they drafted Penix, but that's neither here nor there. But go ahead. I think right now my LB1 is Jihaad Campbell in this draft class. Again, if Perkins hadn't got injured. But Jihaad Campbell is a safety net pick when it comes to linebacker. And we're going to stay on brand here with these guys because, again, guard and tackle is the biggest need. Aireontae Ersery going to the Seahawks. Any tackle going to the Seahawks really makes the most sense in the first round. You got to take care of the right side of the line, which is absolutely atrocious this season. And getting into the Commanders, this is where I want people to walk with me for a second. Outside of Scary Terry, who's entering age 30, there's not a lot of big weapons for the Commanders to use. Yes, tight end play has been all right, but I mean, outside of that, Dynamie Brown, Noah Brown, like I'm not convinced with these wide receivers. So why not get Daniels another weapon? And not just any weapon, but a weapon that he's familiar with, like Kyren Lacy out of LSU. And not just that, but it makes him a great predecessor for Scary Terry. I think having a weapon like Kyren Lacy could definitely boost Jayden Daniels' game. They already have a repertoire as well. I think they went for 7 touchdowns and I think it was 500 plus yards the season. Yeah, 557 and 7 touchdowns the year that they were together. So evidently they can be a talented duo, and I think that's a big weapon for Jayden Daniels. Again, I don't see any of the other weapons for the Commanders just being big threats. I think Kyren Lacy could see himself rise up draft boards. Obviously, Luther Burden could go. Isaiah Bond might be the fastest wide receiver in this year's draft class. But I think having that rep with Jayden Daniels is going to get Kyren Lacy potentially a look in the first round. And we get over to the Texans, and I feel like this is a no-brainer. We're going to start seeing some running backs go in the first round here. Kaleb Johnson has been one of my favorite backs in this year's draft class, and I think had Ashton Jeanty not, tore it up at the first, 4 or 5 games of the season, there's a chance Kaleb Johnson would have been RB1 of this year's draft class. He's a talented back, workhorse back at Iowa, and he offers a lot of upside as a 3-down back in the NFL. Getting into the Broncos, I've been saying it, I think wide receiver is a big need here. But I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give a little bit of grace to some of the wide receivers in Denver. I'm going to let them get another year in, like my guy Troy Franklin, simply because maybe I've been a little bit too harsh, potentially. But we need to get another weapon for Bo Nix. Bo Nix has proven himself to be the quarterback of the future, and I think tight end is pretty much where they are lacking. A guy like Colston Loveland could go in the first round. Gunnar Helm has been getting a lot of love. But my guy, Harold Fannin Jr., is literally number 1 in the nation right now in receiving yards. Now, yes, everybody's going to say, oh, he's playing at Bowling Green. Oh, dude, he ran for 100, or he received 140 plus yards against Penn, then went for 120 against A&M. Like, the talent production is there, guys. So the fact that people are going to say, oh, he can't go first round because he went to Bowling Green, like, no, that's blasphemous. I do think Harold Fannin Jr. is going to test extremely well at the combine. And not only that, once they see him at the Senior Bowl, he's going to rise up draft boards. Being number 1 in the nation right now in receiving yards, the fact that he's not even looked at as the tight end 1 is just insane to me. I understand Loveland's production, though. Tyler Warren is a Swiss Army knife, so I get it. But at the end of the day, Harold Fannin Jr. is my tight end 1. That's what I'm going to take in the first round if I was a GM looking for a tight end. And sliding on into Baltimore, I feel like cornerback's pretty much going to be a big need here. Marlon Humphrey is just starting to show a little bit of a decline. Is Nate Wiggins the future of your secondary? Maybe, but I do think you can grab a guy like Darien Porter comfortably and help, understand that he's going to help boost your secondary. Yes, the guard and tackle could be a need here, but I feel like right now the offensive line is doing pretty fine. It's been evident. Derrick Henry's rushing good. Lamar Jackson has had plenty of time in the pocket to get rid of the football. I don't think you need to worry about your interior offensive line just yet as much as you need to worry about your secondary. And then we get into the Chargers. This is probably where we see Colston Loveland go realistically in the first round. Tight end could be a big need, and we know how much Harbaugh loves his Michigan guys. So Colston Loveland going to the Chargers just seems like a match made in heaven. Just like Luther Burden going to the Steelers. Outside of Pickens, there's really not a big weapon for them to use. I love Freiermuth's game. Again, that's a tight end though. There's no wide receiver 2 or clear wide receiver 3. I think adding Luther Burden to the mix, you automatically know who your wide receiver 2 is. And not just that, he's one of the top slot wide receivers in this year's draft class. So you're not just getting any random receiver. You're going to get a top talent for sure. And we get into the Packers, and I do think not only is defensive line a worry, but secondary is also going to be a worry. But when you see a guy like Kenneth Grant still available at pick 27, it's kind of hard to sway away from that. Yes, I know Jair Alexander might not be there next season, but you need to worry about the trenches a little bit more. I think your safeties are going to help you when it comes to the secondary being lackluster, because I do like what Xavier McKinney brings to the table. But right now you need to worry about the trenches. I was focused on the offensive side of the ball. Somebody pointed out to me the Packers are actually doing very well offensively when it comes to the offensive line. So I'm going to sway away from that. I'm going to go into the defensive side, and I'm going to select Kenneth Grant. Do think he's probably the 3rd best defensive lineman in this year's draft class, but he offers a lot of upside, and he's played on some talented Michigan defenses. So he's definitely ready to transfer over to the NFL, and I think he's going to transfer very well. Getting into the Vikings is probably where we see another running back go off the board. And I was really thinking about how Aaron Jones wasn't going to be the future running back of the Vikings for the next couple seasons. But after watching last game, there's a chance he gets a contract extension and he ends up playing a couple more seasons for the Vikings. But with that, with the recent success that the Lions have seen, I think that there's a chance Vikings could also have their 1-2 punch when it comes to running back with Aaron Jones and Quinshon Judkins. Now, could you just imagine the offense that they would have? They get J.J. McCarthy back next season from injury. You get your 2 running back tandem. You have Aaron Jones as your power back, and then you have Quinshon Judkins as your receiving back. By the way, he can also run the ball. Not only that, you got Justin Jefferson as your X, and then you get Jordan Addison as your slot. Like, this is a recipe for success. Oh, and I forgot to mention, TJ Hawkinson is your tight end. Like, that's a recipe for success. That has the potential to be a top 10 offense in the league. So I think Quinshon Judkins just makes a lot of sense going to the Vikings. And again, I love what Omarion Hampton brings to the table. And I love what Taj Brooks brings to the table. RJ Harvey's having a tremendous year. Jordan James is a sleeper in this year's draft. But I think right now, with the way the NFL is headed and the way we've seen a lot of these 2-back tandems work successfully, Quinshon Judkins just makes a lot of sense to the Vikings. And we get into the Eagles. Running back not going to be a need, so we can get that off the board. Jalon Walker makes a lot of sense here. But if we look at some of our other linebackers, again, I think Harold Perkins does find himself in the first round still. Edge being a big need, Harold Perkins offers a lot of versatility in the secondary at slot. A little bit more than Jalon Walker does. So it looks like Eagles could be on the need, or in the need for someone that can just line outside the box rather than give you that coverage versatility. So I'm going to take Jalon Walker simply for that. Because once we get into the Bills, they're going to be a team that's looking for a linebacker that gives you a little bit more versatility. Because their cornerback play, it's been so-so. I do think that they can have a little bit of a fix. I do think Kyren Lacy needs to bounce back because, again, they selected you in the first round. You need to prove why they selected you in the first round. But I think Harold Perkins could be a guy that we see still go in the first round. I do hope that he bounces back from this injury and still makes it to the combine and still tests in his pro day. And I still see Harold Perkins as a first-round talent. If you turn on tape, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Again, his snap count alone is just eye-appealing when you see how many coverage snaps he played compared to his run snaps. He's been in the mix for a little bit of everything at LSU, and it sucks that the injury really just plagued his draft stock. But I still think he finds himself going in the first round. But with me getting repetitive here, we take a look at the predecessor for Travis Kelce. Now, Gunnar Helm's been getting a lot of love. Tyler Warren has been a Swiss Army knife. And the way that the Chiefs play football, Tyler Warren just seems to make the most sense. Like, all the scheme plays and all the fun plays that Andy Reid draws up, Tyler Warren is a Swiss Army knife. He's lined up at fullback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, you name it, he's done it. Tyler Warren just makes a lot of sense as the predecessor for Travis Kelce, which takes us to the Lions, which is the last pick in this draft. And I'm going to be honest, I've been a little bit stumbled when it comes to taking a pick for the Lions, but edge just makes a lot of sense, especially a guy like LT Overton or Shamar Stewart. A lot of people are loving Shamar Stewart's game. They think he's a little bit faster, and he plays a lot of snaps. So his motor's been there for sure. I like James Pierce because of the versatility that he gives you along the line, but LT Overton, Princely's gonna see his stock drop because of what he decided to do last game, walking out on his team. Jack Sawyer, I think, is gonna rise up draft boards. But safety net pick here, I think, is gonna be James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. He's been one of my favorite edge rushers. Definitely check him out if you guys have not. But here we are with the mock draft for today. Let me go ahead and slide this over for y'all so y'all can check it out and see the full list here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know if you think anybody is just too high to be going in the first round. Let me know if I'm missing anybody from the first round. Again, I appreciate everybody's feedback. Be sure to smash that like button and the subscribe button, as well as we are on our road to 300 subs. See you guys next video. Peace.